Oh,
Hello, this is your Institute Weekly Review. You got Tyler and Mason here, and this week we're bringing you NASA women received the Most Promising Scientist in Government Award. Inspector discovers near weapons grade uranium in Iran. First human transplant of a genetically modified pig kidney performed. And they're going to move on to the next one.
yeah, we'll jump into NASA Women Receive the Most Promising Scientist in Government Award. As many of you probably know, March is National Women's Month. Um, we wanted to somewhat commemorate that by bringing the spotlight to two very promising, relatively young scientists and engineers who have won the government's most prestigious Young Scientist Award. Who we're talking about here are Dr. Jamessa Stokes, who is a material scientist primarily working on advanced space, material science applications for deep space, um, and Dr. Lindsay McMillan Brown, who is an electrical engineer who is primarily focusing on affordable, efficient, and lightweight solar cells, both for space exploration as well as for improvement of renewable energy generation here on Earth. Is there anything that you want to specifically focus the discussion on, Tyler, before we kind of jump into a general implications of this?
Yeah, the one thing I really want to talk about here is something that I liked about this, and that was something I found in Macmillan Brown's background. So I kind of looked her up and I was trying to figure out like what she had done and where she was going and kind of what got her here. And there's an article I found where she was talking about how she really liked when she was growing up to be like a tinkerer. And she helped her father repair cars in their garage, and she learned a lot from her mother, who was a science teacher. So we see like being able to tinker and having people who kind of encouraged her a little bit seem to have had a pretty good impact on her trajectory. Another thing is, this is something she describes herself as. She says that growing up, she felt like this led her to be a part of like a counterculture. And what she meant by that was that most of the things that she was kind of interested in, like sports and tinkering and all this, are not really considered like typical girl things. So I find this really interesting because it's kind of like while maybe somewhat of like there was some nurturing here, maybe there's a little bit of a nurture or a nature aspect that we're seeing here, where like a good scientist is someone who kind of is gonna reject a little bit of what their environment tells them and kind of just go forward and make their own path.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly takes. I think it's getting better and better, but especially these women are older than me, and it's not a predominantly or straightforward feminine, um, you know, profession to choose to go into. It's definitely been a historically male-dominated field. So, I definitely think giving this kind of awards, bestowing this on women in STEM, brings the light to the fact that it's not just men doing this. I think historically, um, there's almost no doubt in my mind that there were a lot of great, uh, you know, technological breakthroughs developed or brainstormed by women, where the credit was taken by the man who presented the speech on it, because women haven't been allowed in these fields in predominantly historic times. But even I can say from personal experience in the engineering field at my place of work, I work on a team of 12 people. One of them is a woman, and she is not an engineer. She's the administrator for the team. There's definitely still walls up dividing these kinds of professions by gender. But I think that we have two great examples right in front of us of it doesn't
But one,
necessarily need to be defined by that.
I don't know, but one thing that I will say that is kind of I guess unfortunate about these award, this one in particular, is that I don't think they really make an effort to explain like why these two got it, other than the fact that they got it, which I think like you want to recognize these people, but if we're trying to effectively encourage people, you want to point to what they did. And it's really unfortunate because like Macmillan Brown, like if you go and look at her Google Scholar page, she's done a lot. So there's a lot that she could point to say, hey, look, This is gonna, help make our future space exploration much more sustainable. But they don't really talk about that. And that's what I think is kind of a little bit annoying about how they presented it. So in the future, when people are trying to think of to how to recognize these people such that they can recruit people in the future, if that's the point, then they need to point to something that would make someone go, "Wow, this is like a superhero. I want to be like them."
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of just kind of saying these are women doing something, and then not, making it more about them being women than them doing something. Definitely
Yeah.
something to think about as we analyze these kind of hot button issues today. With that, I do want to jump over to what you present or prepared to discuss today.
Okay. So here's the gist. A couple months ago, uh, an inspector from the international watchdog for atomic energy from the UN went into an Iranian underground facility and detected near weapons grade or uranium. And what that means is weapons grade uranium is something that has been enriched to 90% purity. And they detected about 83% purity in a couple of cases. This is actually interesting because Iran has stated previously that it's trying to get to targets of like 60% enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so when they found particles that were at higher than that, significantly higher, everyone was like, "What the heck's going on here? Like, you shouldn't even be at 60." We argue that there's no real economic benefit for you being at 60. So why the heck are you at 80? And Iran argues that it's just because of variance in the process. So you're going to see that, and that could be true. Um, but it's a little bit hard for me to tell exactly how much is propaganda and how much is not, because Iran argues that the UN watchdog is basically spearheaded by people who are against Iran. So there's actually an article out there where some spokesman from Iran basically says um, the UN watchdog is just headed by a Zionist, and that's like someone who believes in the like like
Israeli kind
yeah,
of providence.
exactly, yeah. Um, and that's kind of a point of tension because these two areas are right next to each other and they have incompatible religions.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell if the watchdog is just trying to catch Iran being out, and or if Iran is basically just trying to, muddy the waters.
Yeah.
But I dug deeper, and like Iran's only argument for having 60% nuclear, or yeah, 60% enriched uranium is because they want nuclear powered ships, but they have no ships that are nuclear
Mm-hmm.
powered. So it's kind of like, okay. And there's been like instances in the past where they've removed surveillance cameras that the UN uses in order to see what's going on in their facilities. And they've also specifically disabled measurement devices that the UN uses
mm.
in like 2022.
I want to propose a potential hypothesis and kind of get your gauge on it as the presiding expert between the two of us. You could say, do you think that any of this is maybe a bid from Iran to try and justify the reopenings of the Iran nuclear deal that Barack Obama instituted, Trump removed, and Biden has not reestablished, where we essentially pay them large sums of money for them to open themselves up to these kind of regulators to come in and observe them, essentially paying them to not continue with their development. Do you think that this is, on Iran looking at it saying, oh, we have the skills to refine this more. Why don't we just do that until someone gets worried enough to pay us to not? Is there any talk of that in what you've read so far?
Well, it seems like the article it was written from the perspective of like a pro, I guess, UN perspective. And it seems to indicate that it wants us to get back into the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if it is the case that Iran is trying to do that, they're semi-successful because it seems like the international community, except for us, the United States, is behind this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say yes, because that actually would be a huge benefit for them, obviously economically,
Oh
for
yeah,
just chilling.
especially if they already have put the work into developing these skills. Now it's almost like we do the science and someone's going to pay us to not do the science. Like that's straight profit. Speaking of straight profit, I'd like to jump over to the world of medical transplants. This is a little bit of a follow up to one we covered a couple weeks ago, where a genetically modified pig heart was transplanted into a human body. That person that received the heart in our earlier episode was already extremely terminally ill. Lasted about 3 weeks, which was already a very impressive amount of time to live with a pig heart, but still not a long term survivor with this kind of procedure being taken place. The news that I want to cover today is in this photo here. You see Richard Slayman, which is kind of an awesome name, Slayman, who's 62 years old, has been dealing with extremely late stage kidney disease. And he self-volunteered to receive a genetically modified pig kidney, which the procedure took place at the beginning of this week. He's still doing well. He actually even spoke to the media that output the article that I read, saying how he believes that this step that he's taking, he views it as a step forward for all of humanity. He's extremely proud. He views it as him doing his part to save those who come after him with similar disease. It's definitely an extremely optimistic outlook. But what I wanted to maybe try and discuss was the ethics involved in doing this. I think, we murder. Is definitely a charged word there. We kill millions of pigs a year for consumption. I don't really think people have qualms with killing pigs for this reason as well. However, once you start putting that human DNA and splicing them together, you could argue that what you created is a pig-human hybrid. Does that pig-human hybrid have any
Yeah, right.
claim to the rights that we view as basic human rights?
Hmm, that is tricky.
And
Because then at some point, like, what does that mean? So is a human just something that has like human DNA? And if that's the case, well, then it would have to be. But is a human something that has, I think a lot of people would say no, because they'd be like, well, the brain, the hand. But then it's like, what if you grew like a brain
right,
on it? Or like, and in which case it's like, well, it has to be conscious, and it's like, well, how would you measure that?
right. It's
So then
definitely
it
an
gets into the
extremely
whole.
um, you know uh,
But for now, I don't think, like, at least for right now, no practical person would say yes.
I would agree, and I certainly don't mean to take this too politically, but I think it definitely has parallels to the ongoing abortion argument of, if when you look at the fetus or the embryo of a genetically modified pig with human DNA that's going to grow into a pig with compatible with human organs, and you look at a human embryo, you know you can make the argument that they're both sacs of cells. They both contain human DNA. Recently in Alabama, we saw a judge ruled that intravenous human eggs could no
Oh
longer be
shit, this
destroyed
is this
because
is
they
a
were
really
human.
interesting argument.
They were
Yeah.
human material. They were the potential for human life. And certainly, I don't think anyone would argue that these pigs have the potential for human life. But we're only seeing the initial foray into modifying these pigs. And as we modify them more to make them more compatible with what we need them, we might see it, um, you know, progress further. Of course, we're talking purely hypothetical developments here, but if the pig grew a human hand specifically for transplant, or a human foot for transplant, would that change the argument at all?
I don't think so. Not those two. I don't think any of those organs are even the relevant organs that you would want in order to make that argument. You'd want it to be a brain. Like if you
Certainly, that
wanted to
would
make
make
that argument, you'd want it to be the brain because that would actually force people to like go, okay, wait a minute. So like what does this actually mean?
yeah.
Because I just like because the brain could have the potential for consciousness and then that's where it gets into the thing of like um that's when I think it matters.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily think that these ethical
Well, because
dilemmas
to
will
me,
be roadblocks for this.
come again.
You don't see, I guess, from where the perspective, the vantage point we're at now, you don't see this argument putting roadblocks in the way of the progress of this science. You think it's going to be kind of a, we made them to be, kind of livestock that assist us in a different way than usual livestock. They're going to continue to be viewed that way. There's not going to be an ethical dilemma that's going to jam the brakes on this. Is that
I
kind
don't
of
think
would
so.
you say that that's an accurate statement?
Yeah, I don't think so. It would be. I don't think the vast majority of people pay enough attention by the time that it will matter. And
Yeah. No, I could definitely see that. I think it's a case where right now nobody benefits from arguing the other side. The side that I proposed of saying, we can't do this. That's human material that you're disrespecting and desanctifying. Uh,
and I guess I'll also throw in my own thing. Selfishly, I like it when people try new things. So I personally I have a vested interest in wanting them to do this because I think it'd be interesting.
oh yeah, no, I mean absolutely. If we can create biological human part factories, essentially, our organ donor lists won't exist. Like we can
Well,
make
okay,
these on
actually, now that
demand.
I think about it, at that point, why not just grow humans specifically, like for that purpose? I could see someone posing an argument like that where it's like, okay, why go through all this bastardized process to just grow a component, and when you could just basically go the next step further and just be like, boom, we're growing proto-humans that we know are not gonna be healthy, and then we just say, fuck it, we're gonna steal all their organs.
Now that I see people having big ethical dilemmas with. I think that
Well,
that
yeah, but
might be
I
why
can
we
see.
have the pig, because the pig
Yeah.
removes that question from us.
No, that's what I'm saying though, but I can see someone roping it in and just being like, well, this is a slippery slope. Like, or they could just say, well, why not? Like, how is that any different? Is what they could say maybe. So
Right.
I don't know. It depends on if the scientists are successful enough in order to like basically have their research reach the mainstream like religious right that would never look at that research in the first place because they're not
Right.
keyed into it.
Absolutely. I
So
think
if it
that it
hits them, then I could see someone posing that question.
I think the amount of benefit people see compared to the amount of bending their current standing morals to be upset with this, I think at least for the time being, this is going to be um, kind of a process that most people, of course, there's always going to be detractors from progress, but most people, at least with where this procedure currently stays, view this as an explicitly good thing that there's no reason to pump the brakes on. Um, so we'll definitely have to see, how this develops. It's kind of a follow through from an episode a couple weeks back. I'm sure we'll discuss it more in the coming episodes, which you will find on this channel next Sunday. Thank you for joining us. This has been TBD News.
We